Uh, In the Vanity Fair December issue, you wrote about a woman who came up to you
Oh, yes.
at a when you were signing books.
Yeah.
She starts off by saying,
Shall I tell it?
If you can tell, I did.
Yeah.
I've got it here in case. Yeah, tell what happened.
Well, this is my campaign to have a book of cancer etiquette published, which I might do. Signing books in New York after a debate with Tariq Ramadan about Islam. It's a long line. Woman at the front comes towards me. She doesn't even have a book for me to sign. Hasn't bought one. Says, "Sorry to hear you're ill." And I said, "Well, it's very nice of you to say so." She said, "A cousin of mine had cancer." And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that." He said, "Yes, in the liver." I said, "Oh, that's dreadful. I'm really, that's awful." And she said, "But he got better." I said, "Oh, good." And then she said, "But he got much worse again." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And then she said, "And of course he was a homosexual." And I thought, I'm not going to say of course, because how was I supposed to know that? And all his friends and family abandoned him, and he died alone and in great pain, agony, incontinence, piercing pain, humiliation, indescribable horror. And I said, "Oh, well," I was beginning to run out of things to say, but I expressed commiseration with that. And then she said, "So I just wanted you to know I know exactly what you're going through." And I thought, and then left without having
Didn't buy a book.
buy a book. So I thought, now, would she have treated me like that if I was well? Of course not. But people think they have almost a right, if not a duty, to do it if you aren't. So, and I think we need, patients also need to suffer it, to reciprocate by not sort of inflicting it on people. I actually have a badge now, I'm not wearing it, a button that says, "Don't ask, and I won't tell." And some people do make a huge parade of their condition. I've tried to write about it in other contexts. I wrote about the National Day of Prayer and why I wasn't joining it. I've written about imaginative new gene-based treatments, things like that. I don't just want to write my own tumor diaries. That would be a little solipsistic, perhaps.
You wrote in your prologue of your book, as I said, a lot about death.
Which is called
Hitch 22. I personally want to do death in the active and not the passive, and to be there to look it in the eye and be doing something when it comes for me. Why? What's that mean anyway?
Well, it's part of life, so I'd like to be conscious for it. But this is what I thought then. Ideally, I'd like to be making a speech, perhaps, or making love, or, I don't know, sitting with friends. Or, if I had more notice, conceivably to try a sort of Socratic terminus where people gather around and you try and make a fist of a decent farewell. I have had cause to reconsider that now, because if this cancer doesn't go into remission, it's a very unpleasant way to die.
Why?
Well, a quite probable way of doing it is to choke in your own puke, for example. Not a very good thing. And it can be preceded by all kinds of humiliations. So it's not that you're going to die and you're resigned or reconciled to that as part of life. It's that the sentence includes that you be tortured for a bit before you die. And so I now feel a slight bravado about what I wrote there. I would still, if it were possible, like to be awake and looking at people, and if I'm lucky, talking to them. But I'm not so sure I would insist on it. It might be as well to sort of slip away in a narcotic stupor. It might be. But still, there's something about that, may sound very old-fashioned thing to say, strikes me as a bit ignoble. As I say, it's part of life. I want to get as much out of it as I can.
How much during this period have you talked about this kind of thing with Carol Blue, your wife?
Well, a lot, because she's been a great prop and stay for me. She does things I don't like to do. Going on the internet, looking up every conceivable ramification of treatment and possibility. Tirelessly looking for new doctors and new avenues and things like that. So we talk a lot about it. About losing, about what would happen when I've gone, we actually barely have talked about that. My determination is that I'm not going to die of it. I'm not going to die of it now. I might die with it, perhaps some years from now. That is a possibility. And I'm certainly going to do everything I can to be an experimental subject for other treatments, even if they don't work for me. I feel that would be, I say in the book, I quote the great American scholar Horace Mann, who said, "Till you've done something for humanity, you should be ashamed to die." So it's quite a high standard to reach. Well, that would be doing something for humanity at a fairly small cost to myself. Even if it involved protracting a treatment unnecessarily, I'd be willing to do it.
In the middle of all this, a couple of weeks ago, you debated Tony Blair in Toronto.
Well, I've carried on debating on this and other questions.
But we covered it, and I want to run just a clip of you making some points. He's sitting on the stage there with you. Let's watch that, and we'll come back and ask you about that.
As long as you don't want your religion taught to my children in school, given a government subsidy, imposed on me by violence, any of these things, you are fine by me. I would prefer... I would prefer not even to know what it is that you do in that church of yours. Well, in fact, if you force it on my attention, I will consider it a breach of that pact. Have your own bloody Christmas, and so on. Do your slaughtering, if possible, in an abattoir, and don't mutilate the genitals of your children. Because then I'm afraid it gets within the ambit of law. All right, so don't you think that's reasonably pluralistic and communitarian of me? I think it is. Why is it a vain hope on my part? Why is that? Has this pact ever been honoured by the other side? Of course not. And it's a mystery to me, and I'll share it with you. If I believed that there was a saviour who'd been appointed or sent by, or a prophet, appointed or sent by a God who bore me in mind and loved me and wanted the best for me, if I believed that, and that I possessed the means of grace and the hope of glory, to phrase it like that, I don't know, I think I might be happy. They say it's the way to happiness. Why doesn't it make them happy? Well, don't you think it's a perfectly decent question? Why doesn't it? Because they won't be happy till you believe it too. And why is that? Because that's what their holy books tell them.
Why did you do that debate? When was it, actually?
It was at Thanksgiving.
And what condition were you in then?
Well, I sort of timed my treatment so that it would come, because I had a lot of notice of the event, so that it would come at the end of the treatment, when I'm usually much stronger. Because it would have been very irresponsible. It was a huge event. A lot of trouble and money went into fixing it up and getting Blair and getting security and all this stuff. So it wasn't, well, I never liked to counsel anyway, but I couldn't do that. So I was feeling okay, very tired, but physically all right and mentally quite alert. And it was the first time Blair had had a public debate since he stopped being Prime Minister on any subject.
And then you wrote about it in Vanity Fair?
Yes.